Hey everybody, welcome back to NeurosciQ, the best place on YouTube to increase your neuroscience IQ. Today we have with us Dr. Ioannis Prassis, who is going to speak to us a bit about the COVID pandemic and different blood serum tests for COVID-19. Welcome to the channel, Yanni.
Nice to meet you and thank you for the invitation.
Thanks for joining us and giving us your time today. We want to just start off the way we start off every episode. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, some of your background and research so our viewers can get to know who you are?
Sure. So I'm a molecular biologist. I finished my bachelor degree in the Department of Molecular Biology and Genetics back in Greece. And almost 16 years ago, I came to Canada to complete my PhD degree at the University of Toronto at the Department of Lab Medicine and Pathobiology. I completed another 5-6 years of postdoctoral training at the Institute, at the Lunenfeld Institute. And right now I'm a scientist at the pathology department at Mount Sinai Hospital. And I'm actually working closely with Professor Eleftherios Diamandis on different proteomic applications, mostly focusing on oncology and neurodegeneration. But more recently, we tried also to apply our skills for the needs of the pandemic.
I think that's very honorable that a lot of scientists had to face this challenge with the COVID-19 pandemic, where they might have been doing some of their own research and then all of a sudden this virus threw a kind of fork into it and you branch out a bit. So could you tell us a bit about the COVID-related research that you and the group are doing now?
Sure. So as you said it, Christina, the alarm of the pandemic was too loud to ignore. And many of us decided to just repurpose our technologies for the specific needs that the virus has brought about. In our case, being a proteomics lab, immediately traditionally we are focused on trying to identify biomarkers for different niche applications. Immediately, our interest became in the setting of developing new tests for diagnosing SARS-CoV-2, and in the same time trying to identify novel biomarkers that could have some prognostic information regarding separating severe from mild cases of COVID. So that's what we did, and for the first need. We collaborated, actually, we have an ongoing academic collaboration with a company from the States called Mesoscale Discovery that are using an ultra-sensitive chemiluminescent-based technology that allows the quantification of ultra-low amounts of analytes in biological fluids. And we have collaborated, we have done a few papers with them on the development of ultra-sensitive assays, for example, for prostate-specific antigen or for neurofilament light for different applications. But immediately we thought that developing an ultra-sensitive assay for a SARS-CoV-2 protein could have immediate impact for covering the diagnostic gap that we witnessed the first half, at least, year since the pandemic started. In order to do this thing, we agreed to collaborate with the same company, and we are now in charge of the clinical validation of one of their assays. It is an ultra-sensitive assay that measures nucleocapsid protein, and it has some distinct advantages compared to other tests. For example, the ultra sensitivity of this technology allows the identification almost of a single virion in saliva, which is a sensitivity on par with classic molecular PCR-based testing, and it is about 500 times to 1,000 times more sensitive than classic lateral flow and other antigen tests that are commercially available. Parenthesis, having said that, it does not mean always that the more sensitivity is always an asset. A test is as good as the ability to answer a specific question. And if the question is, are there traces of the virus in this patient, this assay is perfectly fit to address it. If the question is this person currently infectious? Then even tests with not super sensitivity can have actually an advantage, because they will only capture patients that they have above a certain threshold of virus, which would make them more closely correlate with their infectivity status. So at this stage, we uploaded a first preprint of our assay. We tested this novel assay in approximately 100 patients. And as expected, the assay performed very well. It had a lower limit of detection in close to the 10 picogram per ml. And this is a very, very, very low limit, even for the standards of a classic ELISA, that it is supposed to be in the clinic one of the most sensitive assays. Typically, we see the lower limit of detection that we see, it is in the 1 to 10 picogram per ml. With this technology now, we can see down to 10 femtogram per ml. And again, depending on what is the question that you want to ask, this ultrasensitivity can provide certain competitive strengths. In the same time, it is a test that is solely done in saliva. And this is, again, offering some certain advantages. You don't have to use swabbing. And this for certain settings, like for schools or for long-term care homes, it could allow an increased compliance of patients when routine testing becomes a need. So this is where we are. We just completed now a follow-up validation of by using almost 700 samples from SARS-CoV-2 positive and non-positive samples. The results of this validation is now expected to be out in the next 10 days. So we're excited for this, and hopefully this will trigger some actions that more and more assays are going to become available for people, because knowing knowing where the virus is the number one step in really controlling this and potentially future outbreaks of the virus.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and we can put a link of the of your article in the description so people can have access to this exciting work. I guess in an environment where you're kind of competing with a PCR-based test that you know, we're all familiar with now as the kind of daily tally of cases, what are the contexts where you see kind of a saliva-based test? Where do you see this being implemented? Is it for daily counts, or is it for specific locations? I think you alluded to maybe schools, airports. Like where would this test kind of add value to the current landscape of diagnostics in COVID-2?
Yes, and that's a great question, Fidia. You know, it depends on what we want to compare it with. If we want to compare it with the lateral flow self-antigen test that we do, the advantages of this test in terms of sensitivity is clear. But the real question is, how does it compete with PCR? And in general, I don't think that it is fair there is such an absence of tools that there's no point in comparing what is better, this or PCR. Both of them are equally good. And I think that there is a big need in the market right now just for any possible tool that even if a test is not even better than PCR, because saliva PCR is also very good. And I think that we have displayed some inertia in our systems in terms of insisting on the use of swabbing, even though one study after the other shows clearly that the use of saliva is actually giving equally performance compared to the use of swab-based PCR. So I think that if you ask me saliva PCR versus saliva our test, I think that both of them are superb tests. Their sensitivity is fantastic, and it is just a matter of trying to capture an ever-increasing market of the demand of people that would like to know their status. For example, we know that during outbreaks, and now maybe the need is not so big because we have done a lot of steps and we are leaving somehow the pandemic a bit behind us, but during the big outbreaks, there was a lot of bottlenecks in terms of supply requirements for PCR technologies, and having alternative technologies in place could really be of help next time there is such another shortage of critical supply reagents. So to answer your question, I think that both of them are equally good. And in the end of the day, it is a matter of who is going to really offer this option to the people, and not so much of what is better than the other.
Mm-hmm. Is there situations where you think one might be better to use though? Like in a school situation, do you think it would be easier to get kids to do the saliva test than to do a nasal swab for each of them?
Yes, I think that saliva is offering this easiness and this comfort for people. I don't think that many parents would like to swab their little ones, or even for very old people. There are a lot of studies now that they show that they really don't like the use of swab. And as I say, it is not just the comfort, is that I think it is unnecessary. And I think in the next phases of this pandemic and maybe of the next pandemics, we will know that for respiratory viruses, the use of saliva would be initially thought as the gold standard instead of just the swabbing. I think that swabbing just happened to be one of the first studies that we had outside from China, was that they used swabbing, and since then this became the standard. But for the last at least a year now, we have a lot of evidence showing that switching to saliva is the way to go. But for this, you would need ultra-sensitive assays if you really want to capture all cases.
Mm-hmm. And when you say ultra-sensitive, is it only capturing when somebody has COVID, or does it capture if they've had COVID and have the antibodies?
No, these are two different assays. The one is antigen assay, the other is the serology assay. So let me say one of the potential problems that we have an ultra-sensitive assay, because the benefits are obvious. You really minimize your false negatives if you have a very sensitive assay. The problem is that sometimes we know that in most cases during the cycle of an infection, you become positive for a test. And the infectivity period lasts much shorter compared to the positivity period of an ultra-sensitive test. So for example, it is known that the PCR test can continue giving you positive results even though you are beyond the infectivity period. And this, from a public health point of view, it may be a problem because you cannot really make the rules apply to those that are currently infectious. So you win some because an ultra-sensitive test is going to turn positive before a less sensitive test. So in the beginning of the cycle of the disease, you have a better positivity timing, a good lead time into capturing this early. But the cost is that there is a longer tail of positivity that does not necessarily correspond to infectiousness. So we have to be careful. That's what I always say. People ask me, is this test good? Is this another test is good? It always depends on what is the question that you want a test to answer. And depending on the different questions, different tests can find their niche out there. And in general, there is, I insist on this thing because personally I got a bit disappointed that we were almost it's almost now a year and a half after the pandemic. And right now there are no easy ways for me personally, if I want to get tested, if I carry the virus right now, it's quite complicated. I still have to go and wait in the lineup or in an exam center. We should have the technologies to really democratize testing much better than what we have done in this pandemic.
Is a test that you could do at home, or would you still need to come to a center? And how long does it take for the results to come back to the user?
So the test, as we see it, it could be a test that the collection of saliva could be at home. So you'd go, let's imagine that there is a website, you go, you order one kit, the kit comes to your home, you just drool some saliva into this thing, you put it in your postal box, and then in 24 hours, you get your results back into your cell phone. Meanwhile, the sample will arrive to the central facility. We will do the assay, and then you will get back your results. Having said that, it's important to know that we as the Diamandis lab, we're not personally interested in really driving the commercialization of it, but there are other vendors that are in the space in offering clinical tests for different applications, clinical diagnostics, in vitro diagnostics. And these are the people that already have shown some interest in taking this and run forward.
Yeah, it's good to hear that we're growing our toolbox that we can use to answer all these questions that we have about COVID. Like you said, you could have two different types of tests, but it depends what question you're asking.
And Christina, this is important to see also the bigger picture. I think that, and I know that I'm a bit passionate about this thing because it's my research focus lately, but we need to appreciate better that living openly with viruses has a tremendous cost to our societies. And this goes beyond the current virus and beyond the current pandemic. We know that this open door policy to viruses is costing huge amounts of dollars in terms of our impacting and burden of our health system. And more importantly, it's costing a lot of suffering to people. About 20% of tumors have been associated with a viral infection as the initial trigger. A huge amount of autoimmune conditions are also known to be triggered by viral infections. In general, I'm done with this common cold situation. I really do not want to hear again when I see someone that is sick and they say he got a cold. What does this mean? Cold does not make you sick. It means that you got a viral infection, but we were blind enough to not know what it is, and we just call it, he got a cold. No, I think that we should have the granularity right now to know exactly what virus someone got, and based on the virus that he got, to make him follow the recommended rules in order to block the transmission chain of this virus and avoid all this unnecessary cost that we are getting as societies from viruses. So I think, and I hope that this pandemic will act a bit as the alarm clock to show us that living with viruses, it has a big cost. And if we really want to get rid of the viruses, the very first thing to do is to invest in wide diagnostics and really try to understand better when someone is sick, why is he sick? What type of infection does he have? And then we will be in a much better situation to control it.
Yeah, so how can we prepare for the next pandemic then? Like you said, we've learned these lessons. Can you take those tests that have been developed for COVID-19 and apply them to other viruses too?
Yes, one thing is education. And one of the lessons learned is that we need a better public health education. We need to convince more and more people, to train more and more people, appreciate better why public health tools are important tools when we have decided to live in these large cities, everyone on top of each other. So we need to upgrade our means of sharing a life in large cities. And let me give you some examples. We know from this virus that this is a virus that is mediated by aerosols since last summer. And even today, I see my neighbors here, they are just still spraying their shopping bags after they come from the supermarket. It's useless. I go to the hospital every day, and I see, even though we are a prestigious institution, and I'm happy that they have done a great work in trying to upgrade our protective measurements, still there's a lot of focus into antiseptics, and the problem is it's not a surface virus. This is an aerosol transmitted virus. If you really want to contain this thing, what you should be doing, you should be training people, give them proper masks. Do not ask people to, while the virus is getting more and more transmissible, you should be using more and more protective, efficient equipments. For example, I don't believe that still in our days, a year and a half after the pandemic, people are not wearing proper masks. And when I say proper mask, I mean a proper N95 mask that will be properly sealed in your face so that it can block most of the transmission that happens there. Also, it's rather disappointing that we have not seen a very massive movement in establishing proper HEPA filters in order to clean up the air system in places that there is a lot of gathering of people, including hospitals, schools, and different services, and you name it. We need to be smart. We need to follow science, and we need to hear what science says and do what is important, not just do something in order to say that we did something. So one of the lessons that I want to really highlight is that we need to listen to the data. Don't do whatever is easy. Don't do whatever is convenient. Do whatever really makes sense. The third thing is, one of the lessons learned here is we should be careful not to allow politics to play into public health. And this is something that we have seen a lot the last year. And I think that I don't want to make it too personal, but there are a lot of examples on how, for example, the states tried to deal with the news of the new pandemic, and the whole even dismissal that happened to the World Health Organization, which, despite the mistakes that happened, for example, from these big institutions, it is really scary to see leaders of countries to really attack these big institutions, which is our ultimate place to place our trust when it comes to these events. So for me, another lesson learned is that leave politics out of science. And I think that in preparation from the next pandemic, which will happen, we need to really reinforce the people's trust to these institutions. We need to make everyone understand that the World Health Organization is beyond any single government. It is something that, global challenges need global trust. And in order to have global trust, we need to really protect these institutions from little political gains. So there are a lot of things that looking back at the whole management of this pandemic that we can get as lessons. And I think that in a way, this pandemic will leave us wiser compared to how we were before. And for sure, we'll be better prepared for the next pandemic.
Interesting. Yanni, so I can't tell the way you're talking. You're excited about your COVID test, but it sounds like you're looking forward to the new pandemic. Do you think this pandemic is over? Have we seen the last of COVID now with vaccinations and social distancing measures and masks, or do you think COVID SARS-2 will come back?
I really do not want to underestimate the tricks of this virus. And it is really difficult to make long-term predictions while a pandemic is up and running. And we need to really define what is the end of a pandemic before I answer if we are there yet or not. But I understand the question, Fidel, and I think that at least in the West, let's say in Canada, with all the data that we have so far about how strong the immunity that comes from a natural infection or from a vaccination is, and we have now a lot of convincing evidence showing that long memory immunity is there in almost everyone that gets a full vaccination, like a double vaccination, or for example, a natural infection +1 vaccine. It shows that there will be strong immunity there, stored as memory cells in our bone marrows, that once we see the virus again for many years, it will prevent us from severe disease or death. We will still be able to get infections, but after these first rounds of immunity, I think that for the majority of us vaccinated people, the pandemic is behind us as a threat to our lives. So I think that overall, and I know that this will sound too optimistic, I think that yes, we are in the very last steps, last turns of this pandemic marathon. And what we're going to witness from now on is windows of normality that is going to become longer and longer and longer, with small local outbreaks that we will see in the next, for example, winter, people that have not vaccinated themselves, or people that unfortunately cannot benefit from vaccination. For example, people that are in immune suppressing medication, those are the people that will continue to perceive SARS-CoV-2 as an immediate life-threatening disease. But for the majority of us, it will be another, what I hate, common cold virus that is going to be in the list of different bugs that will keep us probably in the house out of work for a couple of days, but that's it. So I don't think that the risk of our health system collapsing and our ICU units being overwhelmed, I think that we are already past beyond this step. All this with the important asterisk that a virus can always make some little tricks that is going to end up in a situation that is going to completely abolish all immunity that we have acquired. But seeing from all the different variants of concerns and how potent the immunity is against all of them so far, I would dare to predict that we will not see such a game-changing mutation. And even if the virus will try to become more and more transmissible and getting some other properties, it will not manage to break through all the immunity walls that we have.
That's good to hear.
That's what the data say.
Yeah, I think that's
refreshing to hear an optimistic view forward. And I think you're probably right. I think we've learned a lot. We've made obviously many I don't want to say mistakes, but we've learned a lot from what has worked and what hasn't. And I think as people like you develop new tests that if there, heaven forbid, is another outbreak, we just have more tools to throw at containing the virus.
Exactly, Vivian. There is one important thing, especially that applies here in Canada. I cannot stress more how important the completion of the vaccination is now. We know, I say, that the immunity walls that we get from the vaccines are strong, but it is obvious that it is only through the second dose that the vaccines are getting strong enough to resist the ever-increasing force of the virus as it mutates. So I say that the pandemic is behind us on the notion that by September, the majority of us will complete their double vaccination. It will be a tragic mistake if people now relax, because in the summer, we know that seasonality is huge. That's a coronavirus. Coronaviruses, they dance very well in winter conditions. They don't dance at all, almost at all in summer conditions. So people should not get this as the complete end and don't go and do their second vaccination. From a personal point of view, for every person individually, the pandemic is only behind you once you complete your second dose. Don't forget to go get your second dose. That's really important.
And I want to backtrack to something you said too about people who have had natural infections. You said natural infections and a dose. Should people that have had COVID be getting vaccinated as well?
Yes, actually, there is results from a great group from Rockefeller University that they just published in Nature, showing clearly that if you have one natural infection, you do have a very good response, and you have quite a good breadth of your immunity that you get from a natural infection. But it is through the top up of a vaccination that the amount, the intensity of the immunity that you get is strong enough to really resist even from variants that you have not been exposed naturally. So our bodies have this tremendous capacity. Once the immunity reaches these very high levels, that it, in a way, it learns itself and it evolves itself on how to be better prepared even for variants that it has not encountered. And this is something that everybody should know, that a natural infection, of course, it gives you a good protection compared to immunologically naive people. But the top up of one vaccination, at least, is the way to really build strong immunity.
And what about kids? Because I have a lot of younger cousins and a lot of parents that tell me, why should we get our kids vaccinated if we haven't seen severe symptoms in children? Should they be getting vaccinated as well? Is there a risk to getting vaccinated if you're under, say, 12 years old?
Well, for under 12 years old, it is really tough to say because we still have to wait about to see the results from the clinical trials. They are up now and running. I know a couple of vaccine companies are running the clinical trials in the States. But I can comment on the kids between 12 and 18, for example. And let me be very clear here. We know that this disease is exponentially more risky the older you are. So if we see almost the majority, 95% of the deaths, don't quote my number, but the overwhelming majority of deaths happen in individuals that are older than 65 years old. The fact that kids are less exposed to the effects of this virus, it doesn't mean that they do not experience the effects from this virus. We know that in the States, there are about 300 kids that died from the virus. There are some thousands of the kids that one in almost 3,500 kids that they get the disease, they go through this multi-inflammatory condition that can impact a lot of the kids' organs. Kids are not completely protected naturally from the virus, and this is a dangerous notion. I think that we should really evaluate what is the benefit and the cost of the vaccine. And to the point that we don't have any alarming signs from vaccines against kids, I think that I can imagine a lot of reasons why someone would like to have their kids vaccinated. There are some alarms in terms of some incidences of myocarditis that you may have heard, that we have seen especially in younger male adults. And these are some cases that are quite rare. It happens in about 1 in 50,000 individuals. The exact number needs to be determined. The majority of these cases are very mild. I think that they estimate about 80 to 90% of these cases, they self-heal, or they just may need some anti-inflammatory. And importantly, we need to remember that if a vaccine is able to do this thing, which as an intervention is a very light intervention, you can imagine how a virus that propagates in their bodies can really create all these side effects. So I think that the data now show that even for younger adults, there is a clear benefit in getting the vaccine, even though this is much smaller than the benefit that an older person would get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if anybody's watching, I guess that goes back to your first lesson from the pandemic. We need to educate each other. And so if anybody's out there watching, thinking about getting vaccinated, maybe use what Dr. Ioannis said to help you make that decision.
Yes, I think that sticking to the data, there are so many unknowns. And you know, the right dilemma, I always say this virus is not going, it's a coronavirus, and it is a virus that is really difficult to really eradicate, at least at this point. Maybe in the beginning it was different. That's another huge mistake that I think we did. But at this stage, the idea of really eradicating this disease from our societies is almost impossible. So having a disease that in most chances is going to become endemic, the real dilemma is, should I get vaccinated by the doctor or by the nurse, or should I be getting vaccinated by the virus? So the third option, no vaccine, no virus, it seems to be almost a no case. So I don't understand how people would like to prefer to get their immunity from the virus compared to a much more controlled and lighter intervention, which is actually not irrelevant intervention. It is, we hack a small part of the real thing. It is, in one thing you have, it's as if you're afraid of long-term consequences of either hitting with a car or hitting with a mosquito. So I think that both of them can really create some issues, but the natural infection most of the times is such a heavier intervention that when it comes to potential unknown long-term effects, I think that the vaccine gives a much safer option.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a lot of misinformation too on vaccines, and then some people just don't understand the information out there. So we have misinformation and misunderstanding. So again, going back to that fact that we need to really try and educate people and promote the public health sector so that we can battle not only this pandemic, but any future pandemics.
And I should say, trust science, not the scientists. There are, this is not always correlating. There are, unfortunately, some people, even from the scientific community, that they are trying, from a populist point of view, to create some buzz, or for whatever reason, they try to always play with all these conspiracy theories. But in the end of the day, reality is growing is speaking so loud that all these conspiracy theories are going to really fade away. Look at this. If you go now to all the different countries in which massive vaccinations have applied already, and you go to their hospitals and you look who is in their ICU units, you will see that the overwhelming majority, if not everybody, is people that have not completed their vaccinations. So no matter what everybody says about the efficacy of the vaccines, and if the vaccines, you still get in Seychelles this happened, or in Chile this happens, reality speaks louder than fear. And then when you go and you see it, it's a matter of time until everybody will appreciate that and go get vaccinated. So the problem is that this delay until they realize it is going to be really painful for some people. And that's why being really sensitive to real data, have a close eye on what is the reality, and don't buy on these fears. I think that it is a game-changing event for you.
Of course. And hopefully this video helps shorten that delay. So I think we'll end it there. Thank you for all your wonderful points today. I hope the people watching learned something. If you have any questions about this video, you can comment them down below. But thanks for joining us today, Dr. Yanni.
Thank you, and congratulations for the great video series. I really enjoyed these last days. I've seen a few of them and it was quite educational. Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Yanni. We're lucky that obviously we have great people in infectious diseases helping with the pandemic, but getting someone like you that brings cross-disciplinary expertise, you obviously know every study that's been published. So thanks for your wealth of knowledge, and thanks for helping in the fight against this pandemic that has crippled us. So nice seeing you, and congrats on all your hard work and successes.
Thank you, Phidias. It was a pleasure.
Okay, stay safe, and all the best, everyone. Thanks for watching.